We are now looking at texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, and saturation. So texture is going to pop up the texture on the edges of things. It's a more subtle look than clarity. Clarity is going to hit more information when you're pushing that to extremes. So let's take a quick look. One of the things I like to do to decide whether or not I want to use texture or clarity is just push it to the right and see how it looks. So let's take it up to a larger size, like 100%, and we're going to pull this down so we can actually see how things are looking. Okay, so texture. I'm at 100%. You can see it's doing quite a bit. Double click on that slider, pulls it back. You can see that pretty instantly. Up, double click back. Very rarely are we going to push it all the way. So let's do the same thing with clarity. We're going to push it all the way to the edge. And you can see it's a lot more intense with clarity. Double click on it back. Double click all the way up. Well, not double click, slide all the way up. Double click to get it back. For this one, I'm going to pull it back to about 50% to view. And I'm going to look at the people and the trees here. And let's try that again. So texture all the way up. You can see that you're getting a lot of pump and sharpness happening in here on the texture in the light, the lamp. The trees are looking a little better. And if I were to do the same thing with clarity, everything is just looking crispier and more contrasty. So clarity is adding a little bit more contrast to the image as well. For this particular image, I think I'm going to play with texture. I don't want it to be quite as crunchy as I was looking at with clarity. So I'm going to take it down here, and I'm in the 61% mark. So that's looking pretty good. One other thing to know about texture, if you go to the negative side, you can smooth skin. So you can use it as a selective adjustment or use the adjustment brush to just affect skin if you're working on a portrait. So texture is pretty cool. Next up we have dehaze. That was used a lot to pull the haze out of mountain areas. On this image I don't have a lot of use for it, but it doesn't hurt to move the slider to show you what it does. You can see everything's getting darker and more dramatic. If I go the opposite way, it's getting lighter and hazier looking. I'm just going to leave that set to 0, but play with that. I have a friend that puts dehaze onto every single image he touches, and his images look fantastic. It doesn't really work in my workflow particularly well unless I am trying to dehaze something. Next up, we have vibrance and saturation. So vibrance and saturation are a lot like texture and clarity. Vibrance is a more subtle look. Vibrance is going to hit the more poppy colors, the yellows, the reds, and it's going to stay away from the more neutral colors like the skin tones. So if you have a lot of people or portraiture, if you're working on portraiture, you're going to want to play with vibrance. If you want to affect the whole, every single color in the image, you're going to use saturation. So let's play with that a little bit. I'm going to push it to the right, and you can see the greens are really popping. If I double click once again, it just pulls it back down. So I can push, I can go really extreme, and things just are not looking good. Okay, that's just way too much. So you want to be careful with that. And then the same thing with saturation. I can push it up a little bit. Everything's getting brighter. The skin tones are looking orangier, which is not real appealing. For this particular image, I'm going to play with vibrance. If I go the opposite way, though, with saturation, I can make the image a black and white. If I go the opposite way with vibrance, I still have some of the reds popping out, a little bit of the green. It's not totally taking the color away. But double click back to the middle, and I'm just going to punch this up a little bit to about 42 seems a little high. I'll pull it back a little bit. That's texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, and saturation.